I'm going to tell you what I think the most common, most asked question is by people going through a divorce. And you know what it is? It's, can I stay in my house? Should I stay in my house? Can I afford to stay in my house? Whatever, having to do with the house. And today I want to answer some of those questions. I have the best guest to answer this question. Her name is Jan Leasure. Jan is a mortgage lender. She is a vice president with Diamond Residential Mortgage, and she's a certified divorce lending professional, a CDLP. Hi, Jan.
Hi, Jackie. Thanks for having me.
Always nice to have you. And I want to tell my viewers that you've been in the mortgage business since 1997, right? I think I
Actually,
remember that.
1995, I think. Yeah, close
Wow.
enough.
And then you decided to specialize in divorce several years ago. So you've been doing this a while. Do
We
you
have.
agree with me, Jan, that like every single person in a divorce, I mean, not every single person, but so many people say their biggest stress is, I want to stay in the house. And how do you answer that question?
Well, 100%. So the house, I think, no matter what, and I'm a divorced person as well. So I think that the biggest fear, the biggest stressor when you're getting a divorce, if you are a homeowner, is can I stay in my house? Who will get the house? How do we divide the house? What will happen to the house? Um, the and there's so many different answers to that. And there some of them are good and some of them are not so good. The first thing that I always ask someone when we're talking about their house is, and a lot, I'll preface this by saying that a lot of people that are getting a divorce right now and they're worried about the house and they're in the throes of the divorce or they're in mediation. um, they thought about getting a divorce probably for months or a year or years before they actually pulled the trigger. So I would say to anybody who's watching, if you are even thinking about getting a divorce and you are a homeowner, now is the time to start putting yourself in a position where, if it's possible, you can keep the house. So the very first thing that you want to do is check your check your reserves, check your income, and make sure that out of any sense of contentiousness, you don't inadvertently do something that will hurt your credit, which would in turn hurt your chances to keep your house. So that's the first thing that I would say. And even if you are in the throes of it, I've had so many people that get very angry when they're in the middle of this and somebody decides not to make the mortgage payment. I had this happen in my own situation. So I will tell you, I had a house that was about $1.5 million, had a $750,000 mortgage on it. An agreement between my ex-husband and myself, while we were going through this, was that he would make the payments. I'd put the house on the market. We'd sell the house in a couple of months, and there was a lot of equity in the house to be split. And he silently got angry with me and, without telling me, quit making the payments. And I didn't find out, because I was on the deed, but I was not on the mortgage. I didn't find out until the house was going into foreclosure and I had no way to save my home. So as a former teacher, as a lender, as a loan officer, and as a divorce specialist, it's very hard for me to say that, but I say it from personal experience. So be very careful when things get contentious. If you want to stay in the house, you want to make sure that you can afford the payment. But more than that, you want to make sure that you're comfortable with the payment without having a spouse or a significant other on the other end to toss in some extra income.
Right, because if you are saying, I really want to stay in my house, I love it here, I feel really safe, it's beautiful, I spent 10 years decorating it, it's exactly what I want, but then your mortgage payment's going to be $4,000 and now you're not going to have any extra money to do anything fun, take any trips, buy anything, and you're going to be stressed about it. I personally don't think that's worth it. Maybe somebody does, but it's something to think about. Now, Jan, I was going to ask you if you agree with me on this.
Okay.
People who are getting divorced, of course, they say, okay, I need a divorce attorney. And it's usually the first call they make. They go and have a consultation. I kind of think the first person you should call if there are housing issues is a mortgage lender, because then you have a frame of reference on whether or not you even want the house because you've done all the numbers with the mortgage lender. So don't you do you agree with me that calling a mortgage lender very early on, even before or at the same time as a divorce attorney, makes sense?
I would say that in the first moments, um, when you feel that you're definitely gonna pull the trigger and you're gonna move forward with some type of separation and you wanna stay in your house, I think both parties should get with a mortgage lender or a mortgage banker and get qualified and see where they're at, because sometimes so much money is wasted in the divorce process that you wind up giving up the equity in your home, so it's almost not worth it to stay in your home when that happens. But I also think that getting pre-qualified to stay in your home, um, it gives you a little bit more power in the situation. And if both people do it, I think they're less apt to make poor financial decisions in the throes of anger. I don't know if that makes sense. Yes, you're
Absolutely.
right. Yes, you're right.
Okay, now Jan, what about if somebody has no clue what it even means to have a mortgage, how to get a mortgage? And listen, if you're watching this and you're like, yes, that's me, I'm so intimidated, I don't really understand this conversation. No shame in that at all. Maybe your husband handled the house and the mortgage, and now you're going to have to do it. But Jan, don't you feel like it's so much easier and it's easy to learn and become empowered so that you can make these decisions?
Oh, 1,000%. I mean, whether somebody's getting a divorce or not. And I used to be a teacher. So I was an English teacher, but ironically, I also taught a lot of consumerism in my classes. Just by happenstance. But I think that this is something that should be taught in school, and I think that if people are in a situation where they could be in a divorce situation, both parties should get as educated as they possibly can, because an educated consumer, even from my end, an educated consumer and someone who understands the process and they understand what's coming at them, because it can be very intimidating if you don't know what's happening. There's a lot of money involved, and it can affect your present and your future, and it's very emotional. So definitely, the more that people know, the better equipped they are to go through the process.
So let's talk about what questions you ask somebody if they say like, I really don't know whether staying in the house is the right decision. I really don't know what to do. What do you say?
The very first thing that I do is I do a practice application with them. So I have them fill out an application. We don't make it a live actual application. We do it as an educational process. I am licensed in 14 states, but for people who are within driving distance or in the northern suburbs of the Chicago area, I do have people come to the office, or we can get together on Zoom, and we face to face we go over the numbers and we figure out, okay, here's what your mortgage payment is now. Maybe you bought a house when rates were 2.25 and now rates are 6.5. That's going to make a big difference in whether or not you want to keep your house. The other thing, actually, before this, another thing that I would say, we don't want to end this conversation without letting people who are married and own a home and have a mortgage, that if you did buy a house when rates were low, you might be able to assume that mortgage. You might not have to refinance. You might be able to assume that mortgage if there's another way that you can do a buyout with the other money. So you can't do a mortgage assumption and pull cash out to give it to the other party, but you can do a mortgage assumption to keep your payment low.
Okay, I didn't know if that was still a thing, but that's a great idea and great
No,
to
that is a thing. So I don't like to drive business away from myself, but that really is the first question that I ask people if they're going to stay in their house. Let's see if you can assume the mortgage from the other lender.
Ri excellent, excellent advice. And then also, Jan, don't you ask them like, well, what do you want your lifestyle to be like? Do you enjoy traveling? Do you spend a lot of money? Is this, are you going to go back to work? And so there's a lot of other questions. Do you feel like you want your kids there because you don't want them to change schools and there's really no, other places in your area that you really think you could live? I mean, there are so many things to ask yourself. So if you're sitting here watching this saying, I really want to stay in my home, maybe you can, maybe that's a great idea. And you could talk to Jan about either refinancing or try to assume the loan, but there's so many um questions to ask to make sure that is the right decision. And I think that a combination of talking to a mortgage lender like Jan and a financial advisor plays a big key role in that as well. Don't you think, Jan?
Oh, for
Because
sure. I work with a lot of financial advisors, and we kind of put our heads together, and they ask me questions, I ask them questions, and then we get the whole lay of the land, and we can more easily present options to the person that we're working with. And in answer to your question, do I want to stay in my home? I would say that 90% of the people that I talk with want to stay in their home, usually out of a sense of that's the only thing that I have left that I feel comfortable with, and so I definitely want to stay in that home. I was like that. I actually did want to stay in my home because I built the home when I was very young, added on to the home. It's exactly what you said before, decorated the house. My kids love the home. Um, my kids are 40, they'd still like to move back into that house. However, um, after my husband didn't make the payments and I lost the house, I bought a townhome and I had my mother with me. And ironically, I went from like a 10,000 square foot house to a 2,800 square foot townhome. And I like it better than I did my marital home. And I didn't think that I would, but I feel more comfortable. It's easier to get around in. There's not as much upkeep, not as much that I have to do. It's not as expensive. And I like it better and I feel more comfortable there than I did in my original house. But I think emotionally, the first instinct is I want to stay in my nest.
absolutely, and you're so not alone. So many people are like you. They have that instinct, but then once they get into the townhome or the smaller house, they're like, "Wow, I never knew how much I would enjoy this." Jan, thank you so much for being on Divorceapalooza. I want to ask you, if people are listening and they want to talk to you about getting advice during their divorce or getting a mortgage or refinancing, where can they find you best?
I'm at 533 North Milwaukee in Libertyville, and I have my direct cell phone is 847-293-2111. And I'm pretty much all over the internet. So just Google Jan Leisure and you can find me. I'm not hard to find.
And she's also in the trusted professional section of Divorced Girls Smiling. So, Jan, thank you again for being on the show. And any final words?
My final words are if you are in the process of divorce or if you are even thinking about it, you're not alone. And I would say search Jackie's website because there is so much important information that you can find on there. And people are not alone. Like you can find a million people to commiserate with, and the answers to all of your questions are there with some of the professionals that are on your site, Jackie.
Thanks, Jan. And thanks so much, everybody, for watching.